This 4-year-old beggar girl is thrown out of a wedding for bringing bad luck, but a millionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The bell of St. Patrick's Church echoed through the sunny morning in Oakhaven, announcing the most anticipated wedding of the year. Isabel Montgomery, 28, adjusted the final details of the decorations with trembling hands, her navy blue dress impeccable against the nervousness etched on her face. At 28, she had built her reputation as the best event planner in the region, known for her obsession with perfection and her ability to turn dreams into reality. Each wedding she organized was a work of art, and this one would be no different. It was the union between the Caldwell and Sterling families, two of the most influential lineages in rural Missouri. White roses perfumed the air as the first guests arrived in luxury cars, their clothes reflecting the wealth that ran in the veins of the city's traditional families. Isabel checked her list for the 10th time when she heard a growing murmur coming from the main entrance. Her first reaction was irritation. Any disturbance could ruin the ceremony she had planned for months. Walking quickly toward the church door, Isabel found a scene that made her stomach churn. A small girl, no more than 6 years old, stood on the stone steps, her clothes dirty and torn, contrasting violently with the elegance of the setting. Her bare feet were covered in dirt, and her disheveled brown hair framed a thin face, but bright, determined eyes. "Please, I just wanted a little piece of bread." The child's voice was low, but carried a dignity that touched the heart. "I won't bother the party, I promise." The reaction of the guests was immediate and cruel. Women pulled away their expensive purses. Men in suits frowned in disapproval, and venomous whispers began to spread like wildfire. How outrageous! A beggar at the Caldwell wedding. This is a bad omen. How did they let this child get here? Someone get this girl out of here before she ruins everything. Mrs. Eleanor Caldwell, mother of the groom, stepped forward with her face red with indignation. "Get out of here immediately. This is a sacred ceremony, not a place for beggars." Her cutting voice echoed through the square in front of the church, causing the girl to step back, but without losing her dignified posture. Isabel felt a pang in her chest, watching the scene. Part of her wanted to follow protocol, maintain order, and preserve the reputation of her work. But something in the child's eyes deeply disturbed her. There was a strength there, a maturity that did not match her apparent age. That's when a deep, firm voice cut through the turmoil. "Excuse me." Everyone turned to see Valentine Sterling, emerging from one of the most elegant cars in the parking lot. At 45, he was an imposing figure in the region, owner of several prosperous ranches, known for his honesty in business and his discretion. He had grey hair at the temples, piercing brown eyes, and a presence that commanded respect without the need for harsh words. Valentine walked slowly to the steps of the church, completely ignoring the astonished looks of the guests. He stopped in front of the girl and bent down to her level, studying her face carefully. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Rebecca," she replied, her voice firm despite the embarrassing situation. "Rebecca is a beautiful name," said Valentine, smiling. "Are you hungry?" The girl nodded, biting her lower lip. Valentine stood up and looked around, his eyes passing over every indignant face, every expression of disapproval. "This child will be my special guest," he announced, his voice carrying a natural authority that made silence fall over the crowd like a blanket. What happened next left everyone paralyzed. Valentine extended his hand to Rebecca, who accepted it without hesitation, and together they walked toward the entrance of the church. The businessman, one of the most respected men in the region, was openly defying the most basic social conventions of the community. "Valentine!" Eleanor Caldwell shouted, her voice shrill with shock. "What do you think you're doing? This is a scandal!" He stopped and turned, still holding the girl's hand. I'm doing what should have been done from the beginning, treating a child with the dignity she deserves. His voice was calm, but there was a steel thread in every word. Isabel watched the scene with her heart pounding. In all her years organizing events for high society, she had never witnessed anything like this. Valentine's courage was both inspiring and terrifying. He was risking his reputation, his businesses, everything for a child he didn't even know. Father Michael, an elderly man who had known Valentine for decades, appeared at the church door. His eyes alternated between the businessman and the girl, then to the agitated crowd. There was an ancient wisdom in his gaze when he finally spoke. "Suffer the little children to come unto me," he said, quoting scripture. "The doors of this house have always been open to all of God's children." The tension in the air was palpable. Entire families whispered among themselves, some even considering leaving the ceremony. The wedding that was supposed to be a celebration was turning into a social battlefield. Isabel made a decision that surprised her. She walked to Valentine and Rebecca, ignoring the disapproving looks that followed her. "You'll need a special chair for your guest," she said, forcing a professional smile despite the internal chaos. "I'll arrange it immediately." Valentine studied her for a moment, recognizing the struggle she was fighting with herself. "Thank you, Miss Montgomery. That means a lot." As she arranged a decorated chair for Rebecca in the first row, Isabel couldn't stop thinking about that man's courage. He had transformed that moment into something much bigger than a simple wedding. He had exposed the hypocrisy and cruelty that hid behind the elegant facades of local high society. The wedding proceeded, but the atmosphere had completely changed. All eyes turned alternately to the altar and to the girl sitting dignifiedly next to Valentine, her small hands folded in her lap, watching everything with an attention that revealed an impressive intelligence. When the ceremony ended, Rebecca stood up and applauded politely, her genuine smile contrasting with the tense expressions around her. Valentine held her hand again, and before leaving, approached Isabel. "The wedding was beautiful," he said sincerely. "You have an extraordinary talent." "Thank you," Isabel replied, still processing everything that had happened. Are you really going to take care of her?" Valentine looked at Rebecca, who was watching the decorations' flowers with fascination. "I don't know yet what the future holds, but I know this child deserves a chance. Everyone does." As they walked away, Isabel stood at the church door, watching the figure of the businessman and the girl walking together through the square. Around her, the guests dispersed in groups, their conversations buzzing with gossip and speculation about what they had just witnessed. Eleanor Caldwell approached her, her face still red with indignation. "Isabel, dear, I hope this doesn't affect your reputation. It was a beautiful wedding, despite the incident." But Isabel barely heard her. Her eyes were fixed on the figure of Valentine and Rebecca, who now seemed to be talking animatedly about something. For the first time in years, she questioned the true values by which she had guided her professional and personal life. That sunny morning in Oak Haven had started as another successful event in her career. Now, as the church bell rang for the last time, Isabel had the disturbing feeling that nothing would ever be the same. A question hammered in her mind. What secrets could a 6-year-old girl carry, and how would all their lives be transformed by the courageous gesture of a man who chose to see humanity where others saw only inconvenience? 3 days after the wedding, gossip ran through the streets of Oakhaven like water down a waterfall. In the central market, at the pharmacy, at the bank, everyone whispered about Valentine Sterling and the beggar girl he had taken in as his daughter. The versions of the story multiplied with each conversation, some more fantastical than others, but all loaded with judgment and speculation. Isabel walked through the streets trying to maintain her normal routine, but felt the curious looks that followed her. As the event's organizer, she was inevitably linked to the scandal. Her phone didn't stop ringing, some clients cancelling contracts, others wanting intimate details about what had happened. It was while passing through the central square that she spotted Valentine sitting on one of the wooden benches, talking animatedly with Rebecca. The girl wore new clothes, a simple but clean yellow dress, appropriate sandals, and her hair carefully combed. The transformation was impressive, but it was something deeper that caught her attention. Her posture had changed. She was no longer the cornered child on the church steps, but a confident girl gesturing as she told some story. Isabel hesitated, then approached. "Good afternoon." Valentine smiled, standing up politely. "Miss Montgomery, how have you been?" "Well, thank you." She looked at Rebecca, who studied her curiously. "And how are you both adjusting?" "Rebecca is showing me the special corners of the city," Valentine replied, sitting down again. "Places I had never noticed in all these years living here." Rebecca pointed to a leafy tree in the corner of the square. "Under there is a hole where the ants store seeds for the winter, and in that blue house Mrs. Davis always leaves fresh water for the stray dogs." Her voice was clear and articulate, revealing an intelligence that contrasted with her age. "You know the city well," observed Isabel, impressed by the child's naturalness. "I know all the places where a person can sleep when they don't have a home," Rebecca replied without bitterness, just as a fact. "And I know who the good and bad people are too." Valentine and Isabel exchanged a look. There was something in the way the girl spoke that suggested experiences far beyond her 6 years. "Rebecca," Valentine said gently, "would you like to show Miss Montgomery where you used to live?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "It's far from here, but it has a beautiful view of the city." The three walked through the streets that became progressively simpler as they moved away from the center. The brick houses gave way to more modest buildings, then to vacant lots, and finally they reached the outskirts of Oakhaven, where the prairie vegetation began to dominate the landscape. Rebecca stopped in front of a small structure that could barely be called a house. The wooden walls were worn by time, the tin roof had several holes, and there was no door, just an opening covered by a piece of canvas. "It was here," she said simply, pushing the canvas and entering. The interior was tiny, a single room with a dirt floor. There were a few belongings scattered around, a torn blanket, 2 empty cans that served as containers, and some surprisingly well-preserved children's books stacked in a corner. "You knew how to read?" asked Isabel, picking up one of the books. "Mrs. Harris taught me before she left," Rebecca explained. "She said words were the most important thing a person could have, because no one can steal what's in our head." Valentine bent down to examine the books. They were carefully organized, the pages free from any damage, despite the precarious conditions. "Who was Mrs. Harris?" "She taught the children who couldn't go to normal school. She came here twice a week, brought books and food sometimes." Rebecca's face saddened. "But her husband got a job in Kansas City and they had to move. It's been 3 months. Isabel felt a pang in her heart, imagining a 6-year-old child living alone for 3 months in those conditions. "And how did you get food?" "I did small jobs, swept in front of the stores, helped the lady at the grocery store carry bags, collected cans." Rebecca spoke naturally, without seeking pity. "And there were some places where there was always leftover food. Mr. Johnson's restaurant threw away a lot of good stuff at the end of the day." Valentine was silent, observing every detail of the small space the girl called home. On the wall were chalk marks, forming an improvised calendar where she marked the days. "Rebecca," he said carefully, "do you have family? Parents, aunts, grandparents?" The girl shook her head. "My mum left when I was little. She left a note saying she was going to look for work in the city and would come back to get me." She pointed to a yellowed piece of paper pinned to the wall. "But that was a long time ago. I think she forgot about me." Isabel approached the note. The writing was shaky, and the paper was so worn that it was hard to read the words. It was dated 2 years ago. "And you've been here alone since then?" "At first the neighbor helped me, but she moved too. Then it was just me." Rebecca picked up one of the books and flipped through it lovingly. But it wasn't so bad. I learned a lot of important things. What kind of things? Asked Valentine, genuinely curious. How to know if a person is good or bad, just by the way they look at you. How to find clean water when you're thirsty. How to make people give you food without them getting angry. Rebecca paused thoughtfully. And I learned that when someone makes a promise and leaves, it's not your fault. It's just because they don't know how to keep promises. The silence that followed was heavy. Isabel discreetly wiped away a tear that threatened to fall. Valentine was visibly moved, struggling to maintain his composure. "Rebecca," he said finally, "would you like to come live with me? Not as a promise that can be broken, but as a real family." The girl studied him carefully, her dark eyes evaluating every nuance of his expression. "Do you have a big house?" "Yes." "With a real bed?" "Several." "And food every day?" "Yes, with certainty." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I would like to. But can I take my books?" "Of course, and we can buy many others too." As Rebecca gathered her few belongings, Isabel approached Valentine. "Are you sure about this? The whole town is talking. It could affect your business." Valentine looked at the girl, who was carefully wrapping her books in a cloth. "Miss Montgomery, I lost my wife 5 years ago. Since then, my life has been reduced to work and loneliness. This child, she reminds me of what really matters. But you barely know her. What if there are problems? What if she has family somewhere? Then we'll face those problems when they arise." His voice was firm. "What I can't do is pretend I didn't see a bright, brave child living alone, struggling to survive while adults walk past her as if she were invisible." Rebecca approached them, carrying a small bag with her belongings. "I'm ready." As they left the abandoned house, she stopped and looked back one last time. "Thank you for letting me sleep here," she said softly, as if she were saying goodbye to a dear friend. The way back to the city center was different. Rebecca walked between Valentine and Isabel, holding both their hands, pointing out details she had observed during her years of living on the streets. She knew every resident, every dog, every tree. It was as if she were a little guardian of the city. "There," she pointed to a house with a well-kept garden, "lives the doctor who doesn't charge to treat poor children. And at that bakery, the owner always leaves day-old bread at the back door for anyone who needs it." Isabel realized that Rebecca had a mental map of human kindness in Oakhaven. The girl had catalogued every gesture of generosity, every person willing to help, every place where she found welcome. When they arrived at Valentine's house, an elegant but not ostentatious building in the best neighborhood in town, Rebecca stopped at the gate and gazed at the facade with admiration. "It's really big," she commented. "How many people live here?" "Just me," replied Valentine, "but now there will be 2 of us." He opened the gate, and Rebecca entered slowly, observing everything carefully. The well-kept garden, the spacious porch, the large windows that let the light in. "Can I choose my room?" she asked. "Of course. You can see them all and choose the one you like best." While Rebecca explored the house, Isabel and Valentine stayed in the living room. "She's extraordinary," said Isabel. "The maturity, the intelligence, the way she sees the world. It's as if she has lived 10 lives in just 6 years," agreed Valentine. "But there's something more, something in her eyes when she talked about knowing the good and bad people in the city." Rebecca ran back, her eyes shining with excitement. "I chose the room that overlooks the square. That way I can see when people need help." Valentine smiled, but Isabel noticed a shadow of concern on his face. What other secrets could such an observant girl have discovered during her years living on the margins of society? And how could these discoveries affect their lives now that she had finally found a family? 2 weeks after Rebecca moved into Valentine's house, the social pressure began to intensify mercilessly. What had started as curious gossip turned into direct attacks on the businessman's reputation. At the country club, former business partners avoided greeting him. At the bank, managers who once greeted him with smiles now maintained formal and distant conversations. The last straw came during a meeting with his main investors at Sterling Ranch, his most prosperous property. Charles Bennett, a partner for 15 years, could no longer contain his irritation. "Valentine, we need to talk seriously," he said, slamming the document folder shut. "Your current situation is affecting our business. The Caldwells cancelled the cattle supply contract. The Sterlings are questioning our partnership in the co-op. Because of a 6-year-old child." Valentine kept his voice calm, but there was a growing tension in his shoulders. "Because of your public image," interrupted Ronald Diaz, another partner. "People are talking, Valentine. They're questioning your motivations, your sanity. A single man of 45 adopting a beggar out of nowhere? It raises suspicions." Valentine stood up abruptly, his face red with indignation. "What kind of suspicions?" "You know what kind," Charles said quietly. "And even if they are unfounded, reputation is everything in our business. A family company can't afford to be associated with scandals." "Caring for an abandoned child is a scandal." "It's not that, and you know it. It's the way it happened, in the middle of a wedding in front of all of society, without any legal or social preparation. It seems—" Charles hesitated. "It seems what?" "It seems impulsive, unstable. And unstable men are not good for business." That night, Valentine arrived home, visibly dejected. Rebecca was in the living room, organizing her new books on a bookcase he had specially made for her. The girl had adapted to her new life with impressive naturalness, but she maintained her most striking characteristic, the ability to observe and understand much more than she seemed. "Did something bad happen at work?" she asked, without looking up from the books. Valentine was surprised by the child's perception. "Why do you think that? Your hands are shaking a little, and you didn't take your shoes off at the door like you always do." Rebecca finally looked at him. "And your voice is different, like you're trying not to get angry." He sat down next to her on the sofa, impressed once again with her maturity. "People are talking about us. Some don't like the idea of us living together, because of what I said at school." Valentine frowned. "What did you say at school?" Rebecca lowered her head, suddenly looking more like a child. "I didn't want to cause problems. It was unintentional." "Tell me what happened." "The teacher asked everyone to talk about where they lived before. I told about my little house on the outskirts and about the things I saw at night." Her voice became lower. "About the cars that passed slowly, the men who carried heavy things, the conversations in low voices." A chill ran down Valentine's spine. "Oh, what kind of things?" "Big trucks that arrived late at night at the abandoned farm near my house, men who unloaded cattle and put others in their place. They talked about fake papers and about not letting anyone see." Rebecca looked at him with concern. "Did I do something wrong?" Valentine tried to keep his expression neutral, but his heart was pounding. Cattle smuggling was a serious crime in the region, involving tax fraud and animal theft. If Rebecca had witnessed this— "Did you tell this to anyone else?" "Only to the teacher and to my classmates, but Sarah, who is Charles's daughter, got very angry with me. She said I was making up stories to get attention." Rebecca paused. "But I wasn't making it up. I really saw it." At that moment, Valentine understood the true dimension of the problem he faced. It wasn't just social prejudice or malicious gossip. Rebecca had inadvertently exposed criminal activities that apparently involved people close to him. The next day, the situation worsened dramatically. Isabel received a phone call that left her stunned. On the other end of the line, Alex Montgomery, her younger brother, spoke with an urgency she had rarely heard in his voice. "Isabel, I need to see you urgently. It's about that man you met at the wedding." "Valentine? What about him?" "I can't talk on the phone. Meet me at the cafe in the square in an hour." When she arrived at the meeting, Isabel found Alex visibly nervous. At 32, Her brother had always been the most ambitious of the family, working in the administrative sector of the local agricultural cooperative. But that day, there was something different about his posture, an agitation that bordered on despair. "I need you to stay away from Valentine Sterling," he said bluntly. "Why?" "I barely know him." "Because he's under investigation. The girl he adopted has been spreading stories about illegal activities in the region. Stories that could destroy many respectable families." Isabel felt a knot in her stomach. What kind of stories? Cattle smuggling. The girl claims to have seen nighttime operations, illegal transport of animals, forgery of documents. Alex lowered his voice. "And some of these allegations involve properties where I have professional interests." "Alex, are you involved in anything illegal?" "Of course not," he replied too quickly. "But I work with cooperative documentation. If they start investigating everything this girl said, they'll turn over every paper, every transaction from the last few years. Even legitimate businesses can look suspicious under scrutiny." Isabel studied her brother's face, looking for signs of lying. "What do you want me to do? Convince Valentine to give the girl back to where she came from? Say it's for her own good, that a child shouldn't be involved in adult messes?" "Give her back? Alex, she's a 6-year-old child. She's not an object to be returned. You don't understand the seriousness of the situation. There are powerful people very nervous about her allegations. If Valentine doesn't take action, they will." "That sounds like a threat." Alex looked away. "It's just a brotherly warning. Protect your career, Isabel. Don't get involved in this mess." That afternoon, disturbed by the conversation with Alex, Isabel decided to visit Valentine. She found him in the garden with Rebecca, teaching her how to plant pecan saplings, a local tradition he wanted to preserve. "The seeds need patience," he explained. "There's no point in forcing growth. The tree will grow in its own time, but when it grows, it will bear fruit for decades." Rebecca handled the soil carefully, completely absorbed in the activity. "How do you know it will work?" "Because we take good care of it from the beginning. We give it water, fertilizer, love. The plants feel when someone cares about them." Isabel watched the scene with emotion. There was something deeply touching about Valentine's patience, the way he treated every question from Rebecca as if it were the most important thing in the world. "Valentine," she called to him, "can we talk?" They moved away to the porch while Rebecca continued planting. Isabel related the conversation with Alex, watching as Valentine's face progressively darkened. "So that's it," he said finally. "The problem isn't me taking care of a child. The problem is that this child knows too much. Are you going to give up on her?" Valentine looked at Rebecca, who was now watering the seedlings with absolute concentration. "Isabel, do you have siblings?" "Just Alex. I was an only child. I always wanted a family, but my wife couldn't get pregnant. When she died, I thought I would never have the chance to be a father." He paused. "Rebecca gave me something I thought I had lost forever, purpose. Someone who needs me, who trusts me. But if what Alex said is true, if it's true, then Rebecca needs protection more than ever. A child who has witnessed crimes should not be silenced. She must be protected." At that moment, Rebecca ran to them, her face illuminated with joy. "I planted 5 seedlings. Do you think they'll all grow?" "I'm sure of it," Valentine replied, hugging her. "Because we're going to take good care of them." Isabel watched the embrace and felt something break inside her chest. For the first time in years, she questioned whether the values by which she had guided her life, social status, approval from society, professional success, really mattered in the face of the genuine love she was witnessing. But as the three remained on the porch, watching the small seedlings in the garden, none of them noticed the dark car parked down the street, nor the man who watched them with binoculars, noting every movement in a small notebook. The pressure on Valentine was only beginning, and the coming weeks would bring challenges that would test not only his determination, but the very safety of everyone involved. The months that followed brought a radical transformation in Rebecca's life that surprised even Valentine. Enrolled in the best private school in Oak Haven, the girl not only adapted quickly to the academic environment, but began to excel in an extraordinary way. Her grades were consistently the highest in the class, but it was her thirst for knowledge that most impressed the teachers. "She asks questions that not even college students ask," commented teacher Mary Johnson during a meeting with Valentine. "Yesterday she asked why prairie plants have such deep roots and how this relates to water conservation. When I explained, she wanted to know if this could help solve drought problems in other regions." Valentine smiled with pride, but noticed a concern in the educator's voice. "Is there a problem?" "Not exactly a problem, but—" She hesitated. "Rebecca has demonstrated a very advanced knowledge of certain adult issues. Yesterday, during a class on local economics, she described in impressive detail how the cattle market works, including technical aspects that even some adults don't know. She's a very observant child." "Yes, but there's something more. She mentioned details about nighttime transport of animals, about how to identify cattle with irregular documentation." The teacher lowered her voice. "This is information that a child could only have obtained by witnessing questionable activities." That same week, Valentine made a decision that would again change the course of their lives. He hired Professor Walter Thompson to give Rebecca private music lessons. He had noticed that the girl constantly hummed, improvised melodies while playing, and demonstrated an impressive natural musicality. Walter was a respected musician in the region, known for his patience with children and his ability to identify special talents. When he arrived for the first lesson, he brought a small guitar, suitable for Rebecca's size. "Have you ever played an instrument?" he asked, tuning the guitar. "No, but I've always wanted to learn," replied Rebecca, her eyes shining with curiosity. "When I lived in the little house, I sometimes heard music coming from Mr. Johnson's house. It was so beautiful that it made me forget the hunger." Walter started with basic exercises, teaching her to hold the instrument and form the first chords. To his surprise, Rebecca absorbed each piece of information with astonishing speed. In just 1 hour, she could already play a simple melody. "She has a natural gift," Walter confessed to Valentine after the lesson. "It's not just technical talent. She has something rarer. She feels the music. She understands its soul." As Rebecca blossomed in her studies and discovered her musical talent, the pressure on Valentine intensified, cruelly. The malicious rumors spread by Alex began to gain traction in town. Venomous whispers circulated in bars, churches, and social gatherings. "A single man with a girl. It's not natural," people said. "He must have ulterior motives. Why else would someone do that? That child was a beggar. Who guarantees she isn't being used?" The situation reached a critical point when Mrs. Henderson, president of the school's Parent-Teacher Association, approached the principal with a petition signed by dozens of families, demanding an investigation into Rebecca's irregular situation. "We cannot allow our children to associate with a situation that raises so many questions," she declared, slamming the paper on the principal's desk. "It's our responsibility as parents to protect our children." The principal, a sensible woman named Carol, tried to argue. "Rebecca is an exemplary student. There is no indication of problems. It's not about the girl, but the whole situation. A man who adopts a child in such a irregular way raises suspicions. And now we find out that she has been spreading stories about criminal activities in the region. That is disturbing." Thus, on a Thursday afternoon, Valentine received a call that chilled his blood. It was a social worker from the county, informing him that an investigation had been opened into his suitability to care for Rebecca. "Mr. Sterling, I need to schedule a home visit to assess the living conditions of the minor. It will also be necessary for you and the child to undergo psychological evaluation." Based on what? Anonymous complaints about the irregular nature of the adoption and about possible exposure of the minor to inappropriate activities. When Valentine gave the news to Rebecca, the girl received it with disconcerting maturity. They were in the garden, and she continued watering the pecan saplings they had planted together, now with the first green sprouts appearing. "Are they going to take me back to the streets?" she asked simply. "I won't let that happen," Valentine replied firmly. "We are a family now. But what if they say you can't take care of me?" Valentine knelt beside her, holding her small hands that still smelled of earth. "Rebecca, do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then believe me when I say we're going to face this together, no matter what happens." Rebecca nodded, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "It's because of the things I said at school, isn't it? About the men and the trucks. It's not your fault. You just told the truth. But sometimes the truth hurts people." That night, unable to sleep, Valentine walked to Rebecca's room. He found her awake, practicing chords on the guitar silently, just moving her fingers across the strings without producing sound, so as not to disturb. "Can't sleep. I was composing a song," she replied. "Professor Thompson said music helps when we're sad. Can I listen?" Rebecca positioned her fingers and began to play a simple but touching melody. It was a melancholic combination of chords she had learned, but organized in a completely original way. When she began to sing, her soft voice filled the room. "Little plants grow slowly. They need time to sprout, but when they find someone to care, they will never get hurt again." Valentine felt tears in his eyes. In just a few months, this girl had become the center of his life, bringing light to corners he didn't even know existed in his heart. "It's a beautiful song," he said. "It's about us," Rebecca explained, "about how plants and people need care to grow." The next day, the social worker arrived for the home visit. She was a serious woman named Nancy, who inspected every room of the house with meticulous attention. Rebecca accompanied her politely, answering questions about her routine, her school, her relationship with Valentine. "Do you feel safe here?" Nancy asked. "Yes. Valentine teaches me important things, like planting trees and playing the guitar. And there's always good food. Has he ever hurt you?" "No, he would only hurt me if he didn't let me water the plants because they need water to grow." Nancy smiled involuntarily at the innocent answer, but continued with her routine questions. At the end of the visit, she seemed impressed with the family structure she found. "The girl seems well adjusted," she commented to Valentine, "but there are questions about how the adoption happened. Without a proper legal process, without a supervised adaptation period." "I was moved by my heart," Valentine replied. "When I saw a child being rejected by everyone, I couldn't stand idly by." "I understand your motivation, but there are procedures that exist to protect both the child and the adult. I will recommend that you immediately begin the legal adoption process." That night, while they were having dinner, Rebecca asked a question that caught Valentine off guard. "If they don't let you stay with me, will you forget about me like my mother forgot?" "Never," Valentine replied without hesitation. "Even if they forbade me from seeing you, you would always be my daughter in my heart." "Promise?" "I promise." Rebecca smiled, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she kept secrets of her own, something about the things she saw at night that she had not yet fully revealed. And as the social investigation deepened, this undisclosed information would become the key to understanding not only the girl's past, but also the true reasons behind the campaign against Valentine. The truth was about to emerge more explosively than anyone could imagine, and when it did, the lives of everyone involved would be transformed forever. The social investigation took an unexpected turn when Rebecca, during one of the sessions with the psychologist, revealed details that no one was prepared to hear. What had begun as a routine assessment turned into something much more complex and disturbing. Rebecca, said Dr. Elizabeth, a psychologist experienced in cases of vulnerable children. Can you tell me more about the things you saw from your old house at night? The girl hesitated, playing with the strings of the small guitar that Valentine had allowed her to take to the session. Are you going to tell everyone? Only if it's something that can help you or protect other people. Rebecca took a deep breath and began to speak with disturbing clarity. Every Tuesday and Friday after midnight, big trucks arrived at the abandoned farm. Men unloaded skinny cattle and put fat cattle in their place. They talked about switching the papers and about not letting the annoying inspector find out. The psychologist made careful notes. Do you remember any names they said? The man in charge of everything was named Alex. The others always asked, did Alex confirm, or has Alex prepared the documents? Rebecca paused. And there was a woman, too, who appeared sometimes. They called her Doctor. Dr. Elizabeth's heart raced. Alex was a common name, but combined with the other details. Do you remember anything else about this woman? She drove a small white car and always carried a leather briefcase. Once I heard them saying that she had managed to fool the official vet again. Rebecca's revelations were immediately reported to the appropriate authorities. Within days, a discreet investigation was opened into cattle smuggling activities in the region. What they discovered confirmed the worst fears. There really was a sophisticated scheme involving forgery of documents, substitution of animals, and corruption of inspectors. Meanwhile, Isabel was facing her own crisis. Alex's pressure for her to stay away from Valentine had intensified, but something inside her resisted. The more she knew Rebecca and observed the positive transformation in the girl's life, the more she questioned her brother's motives. It was during a family lunch that the truth began to emerge in a devastating way. Alex arrived at his parents' house, visibly nervous, his hands shaking as he picked up his glass of water. I need to travel for a few weeks, he announced abruptly. Work issues in Kansas City. What kind of issues? Asked his father, an observant man who had noticed his son's growing anxiety. Nothing important, just some documents to review at the cooperative. Isabel studied her brother's face. Alex, does this have to do with the cattle smuggling investigations? The silence that followed was deafening. Alex turned pale, his hands trembling even more. I don't know what you're talking about. The girl Valentine adopted gave information about illegal activities. Very specific information. Isabel leaned forward. Information that includes the name of someone called Alex. That's coincidence. Alex is a common name. Is it really? His father's voice cut through the air like a blade. Son, are you involved in something you shouldn't be? Alex broke down. The words came in a torrent as if a dam had burst. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It started small, just adjusting some documents to facilitate transport. But it grew, involving more people, more money. My God, whispered his mother, bringing her hands to her face. It was only to raise money to start my own company. I was going to stop as soon as I had enough. Alex continued desperately. But then that girl appeared, talking about things she saw, and now everyone is under suspicion. Isabel felt the world collapsing around her. That's why you wanted me to convince Valentine to get rid of Rebecca, to silence a witness. She's just a child. She doesn't understand the gravity of what she's saying. A child who was abandoned and has now finally found a family. Isabel stood up, furious. And you want to destroy that to protect your crimes. That night, Isabel barely managed to sleep. All her life had been built around family values, loyalty, mutual protection. Now she found herself facing an impossible choice: protect her brother or do what she knew was right. The next morning, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She sought out Valentine at his home, finding him in the garden with Rebecca, who was practicing guitar under the shade of the pecan tree. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice tense. They moved away so that Rebecca would not hear. Isabel related the entire conversation with Alex, watching as Valentine's face darkened progressively. So that's it, he murmured. It wasn't prejudice about my relationship with Rebecca. It was fear that she would say too much about what she knew. Valentine, my brother is involved in criminal activities. If I testify against him, my family will never forgive me. My company, my clients are all from that elite who may be compromised. You don't have to do anything, Valentine said gently. It's not your responsibility. Yes, it is, Isabel replied vehemently. It's everyone's responsibility. Rebecca is just a child who had the courage to tell the truth. If we adults don't protect her, who will? They looked at the girl, who was now humming a soft melody while playing. There was a purity in that scene that contrasted brutally with the corruption they had discovered. There's something else you need to know, Isabel continued. Alex mentioned a doctor who helped in the scheme. A veterinarian who falsified official reports. Do you know who it is? I have a suspicion. Dr. Jane Doe. She attends several farms in the region and has always had a standard of living above what her clinic would justify. That afternoon, Isabel made the most difficult decision of her life. She sought out the authorities and delivered all the information she possessed about the smuggling scheme, including the involvement of her own brother. Ms. Montgomery, said the officer in charge of the case, do you understand that this may generate reprisals against you and your family? I understand. But a child had the courage to tell the truth when she was just an abandoned girl. Now that she has a family to protect her, I can't do less than that. The consequences were immediate and brutal. In 2 days, 3 important clients cancelled contracts with her event company. In a week, her mother stopped talking to her. In 15 days, she received an ultimatum from the country club. Either she publicly retracted her unfounded accusations or her membership would be cancelled. Isabel was ruining her social and professional life. Everything she had built for years was collapsing because of a decision of conscience. It was on a particularly difficult afternoon, after losing another client, that she found herself walking aimlessly through the streets of Oakhaven. She ended up stopping in front of Valentine's house, where she could hear music coming from the garden. Rebecca was giving a small, improvised performance. She had invited some children from the neighborhood, children of domestic workers, gardeners, doormen, and was playing for them under the pecan tree. Their voices joined in a simple song about friendship and hope. Valentine was sitting on the steps of the porch, watching with a smile that Isabel had never seen before. It was the expression of a man completely fulfilled, who had found his purpose in life. How can you be so calm? She asked, sitting down beside him. With everything that's happening, the investigations, the social pressure. Because for the first time in years, I know I'm on the right side, Valentine replied. It doesn't matter what happens to me. Rebecca is safe, she's growing, she's happy. That's worth any sacrifice. Isabel watched the girl, who was now teaching the other children to play simple chords. She really has a special gift. Not just for music, for seeing the goodness in people too. Did you know she asked me if you would like to work with me? How so? She said that you seem sad lately, that you need real friends. She asked if I couldn't give you a job so that you could be close to people who don't judge. Valentine smiled. A 6-year-old demonstrating more wisdom about human relationships than most adults. At that moment, Isabel understood something fundamental. She had spent her whole life trying to please people who would abandon her at the first difficulty. Rebecca and Valentine, on the other hand, represented something she had forgotten existed, relationships based on authenticity and mutual care. Valentine, she said, if you're serious about that job, I accept. He looked at her surprised. Even knowing that this could completely ruin your reputation in high society? Especially because of that, Isabel replied, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It's time to build a life based on real values, not on appearances. As the 2 families formed there in that garden, one based on adoption through love, the other based on the choice to do what is right, None of them imagined that the biggest twist was yet to come. For there was a secret about Rebecca's past that not even she herself knew completely. A secret that would transform not only their lives, but their entire understanding of justice and redemption in Oakhaven. A year and a half after that wedding that changed everything, Oakhaven awakened to a special morning. The central square was being decorated with colorful banners and a small wooden stage, prepared especially for the first children's festival in the city, an initiative that had sprung from a simple idea of Rebecca's. "Why are parties always just for adults?" she had asked a few months ago, observing the preparations for yet another exclusive social event. Children also have beautiful things to show. Now, at the age of 7, Rebecca was preparing for her first official public performance. No longer the rejected girl from the church steps, but a confident child who had found her voice through music and the unconditional love of a chosen family. Valentine adjusted the strings of her guitar for the 10th time, his hands trembling slightly, more nervous than his own daughter. The adoption process had been officially finalized 3 months ago in a simple but moving ceremony where Isabel served as the godmother. Now Rebecca was legally Rebecca Sterling, but for both of them she had always been their daughter since that first day. "Dad," she said, using the word that never failed to move Valentine, "do you think people will like the song I wrote?" "I'm sure," he replied, kissing her forehead. "But even if they didn't, I would be proud of you just the same." Isabel arrived carrying a crown of prairie flowers that she had made especially for Rebecca. In recent months, working as manager of Valentine's properties, she had discovered talents she didn't even know she possessed. More than that, she had found a family based not on blood, but on daily choices of love and care. "Ready for your big day?" she asked, adjusting the crown in Rebecca's hair. "I am. And you?" The simple question carried a greater weight than it seemed. During the last year, the three had faced storms that could have destroyed any family. The investigation into the smuggling scheme had resulted in several arrests, including Alex and Dr. Jane Doe. The scandal had deeply shaken local high society, exposing networks of corruption that some preferred to keep buried. Isabel had lost almost all her old clients and had been rejected by a large part of her family. Valentine had faced commercial boycotts and had to completely restructure his business. But something extraordinary had happened. New people had appeared in their lives. Honest ranchers who admired their integrity, simple families who respected their values, children and young people who saw in Rebecca an inspiration. In the square, a crowd was beginning to form. It wasn't the traditional elite of Oakhaven. They still maintained a proud distance. It was something different. Rural workers with their families, local merchants, teachers, public servants, the elderly, and many children. People who had understood that the true value of a community lay not in exclusion, but in welcoming. Professor Thompson, now Rebecca's proud mentor, adjusted the microphone on the small stage. "She's going to surprise everyone," he said to Valentine. "Her talent has grown extraordinarily, but it's her emotional maturity that is most impressive. She sings like someone who understands deeply about overcoming." When it was her turn to perform, Rebecca stepped onto the stage with a natural elegance that had nothing to do with pose or artificiality. It was the grace of someone who had found her place in the world. "This song," she said into the microphone, her clear voice reaching every corner of the square, "is for all the people who have helped me grow, and for all the children who are still looking for their family." The first guitar chords echoed through the square. It was the melody she had composed months ago, but now expanded and enriched with new verses that spoke of journey, hope, and unconditional love. Little plants grow slowly. They need time to sprout. But when they find someone to care, they will never get hurt again. "I was small, I was alone, walking on a dark road, but someone gave me their hand, showed me that love is an adventure. Today I have a father, I have a mother of the heart, I have music, I have a home, I have protection, and I learned that family isn't just blood, it's who chooses to stay when everything is difficult. Tears ran freely down the faces in the crowd. Even some people who had initially criticized Valentine found themselves visibly moved. It was impossible to hear that pure voice, full of gratitude and wisdom, without being deeply touched. When the music ended, the silence was total for a few seconds. Then it exploded into applause that seemed never to end. Children screamed with joy, adults wiped their eyes, and Rebecca smiled with that natural humility that characterized her. "Thank you," she said into the microphone, "and remember, every child deserves a chance to grow with love." She stepped off the stage and ran straight into the arms of Valentine and Isabel. There, embraced in the middle of the square, the three formed an image that symbolized everything Oakhaven had learned about the true strength of a community. Later, as the party stretched into the night with other performances by local children, the mayor approached Valentine. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "I would like to make a proposal. How about we make this festival an annual event and more? How about we create a municipal program to support children in vulnerable situations?" "It's an excellent idea," Valentine replied, "but the person who should coordinate this is Isabel. She has experience in event organization and, more importantly, understands the reality of these children." Isabel, who was listening to the conversation, felt her heart race. It was an opportunity to rebuild her career, but now focused on something that really mattered. "I accept," she said without hesitation, "but with one condition. Rebecca will be our special consultant. No one understands the needs of abandoned children better than someone who has gone through it." Months later, the Little Sprouts program had already helped dozens of children in Oakhaven and neighboring towns. Isabel had discovered that using her organizational talents for social causes was infinitely more rewarding than organizing weddings for the elite. Valentine had expanded his activities to include a farm school where needy children learned about sustainable agriculture and music. And Rebecca, she continued to be the heart of everything. Now 8 years old, she studied full-time but dedicated her afternoons to teaching guitar to other children in the program. She had become, without realizing it, a small community leader who inspired change wherever she went. One afternoon in December, a year after the first festival, the three were in the garden observing the pecan saplings they had planted together. The trees were now almost 3 feet tall, their green leaves shining under the prairie sun. "Remember when we planted these seedlings?" asked Rebecca, watering them with the same care as always. "As if it were yesterday," Valentine replied. "You said they would grow in their own time, but that when they grew, they would bear fruit for decades. And they will." Rebecca smiled, observing the small trees. "It's like us, isn't it? We need time to grow, but when we find where to plant roots, we can do beautiful things for a long time." Isabel felt her eyes fill with tears, tears of gratitude. That girl had taught them all about the true nature of love. It wasn't possession or obligation, but a daily choice to care for, protect, and support each other's growth. "Rebecca," said Valentine, "you know that regardless of what happens in life, you will always be my daughter, right?" "I know, and you will always be my real family," she replied, hugging them both, "the family that chose to love me when I had nothing to give in return." "You had everything to give," Isabel corrected. "You taught us about courage, about doing what is right even when it is difficult, about how love can transform an entire community." As the sun set over Oakhaven, painting the sky with golden tones that were reflected in the leaves of the pecan tree, the city breathed a harmony that had not existed years before. The Children's Festival had become a tradition awaited by all. The Little Sprouts program helped families throughout the region. And the story of Valentine, Isabel, and Rebecca had become a symbol that real changes are possible when ordinary people choose to act with courage and compassion. Rebecca would grow up to become a respected music educator, would found community schools, and would continue transforming lives through music and example. Valentine would expand his social projects throughout the state, proving that entrepreneurs can be agents of positive change. Isabel would become one of the leading advocates for children's rights in Missouri, using her experience to influence public policies. But on that afternoon in December, they were simply a family watering trees in the garden, planning dinner, talking about the day. A family that had been born not from chance or biology, but from the conscious decision that every human being deserves love, dignity, and the chance to flourish. And the pecan seedlings continued to grow, slowly but firmly, their roots deepening in the generous soil of the prairie, promising fruit and shade for future generations. Just as the love that had been born in that garden would continue to spread, creating waves of kindness that would touch lives not yet born, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the simplest gestures of a heart, willing to see beauty where others see only problems.